Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bakar banu mikol hamin venatan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah. Amen. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who chose us from all the peoples and gave to us his Torah. Blessed are you, O Lord, the giver of the Torah. Amen. Amen. I'm going to read in Genesis 23, and I'll start in verse 1 if you'd like to follow along. And then I'm going to skip over to a portion of all three chapters. In chapter 23, verse 1, it starts with Sarah lived to be 127 years old. She died at Kiryat Arba, that is Hebron, in the land of Canaan. And Abraham went to mourn for Sarah and to weep over her. Then Abraham arose from beside his dead wife and spoke to the Hittites. He said, I am an alien and a stranger among you. Sell me some property for a burial site here so I can bury my dead. Now, if we go over to chapter 24, verse 1, Abraham was now old and well advanced in years, and the Lord had blessed him in every way. He said to the chief servant of his household, the one in charge of all that he had, put your hand under my thigh. I want you to swear by the Lord, the God of heaven and the God of earth, that you will not get a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites, among whom I am living, but will go to my country and my relatives and get a wife for my son Isaac. And then in 25, verse 1, it says, Abraham took another wife, whose name was Katura. She bore him Zimran, Yokshan, Midian, Itzbak, Shua. Yokshan was the father of Sheba and Dedan. The descendants of Dedan were the Asherites, the Letushites, the Lamanites. And the sons of Midian were Ephrash, and all these were descendants of Katura. Abraham left everything he owned to Isaac, but while he was still living, he gave gifts to the sons of his concubines and sent them away from his son Isaac to the land of the east. Now, if you join me in the blessing after the reading from the Torah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah timet v'chayei olam nata botekanu Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah. Amen. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who gave us the Torah of truth and planted everlasting life within us. Blessed are you, O Lord, the giver of the Torah. Amen. Amen. Yes, Bill.
Did you find a Hebrew interlinear Bible here? I left one last week.
You did last, you know, it's a real thick one. And did you check right back here in the box?
I did.
You did? Okay. Yeah, we'll ask around and see. Okay. He left a Bible here last week.
Bill did?
Bill did.
The one I sold?
Oh, man. Don't you feel the love, Bill? Okay, everybody. Today's parashah is Chayei Sarah. Okay. This is a wonderful parashah, but let me just jump right into it. Sarah is the only woman in the scripture whose age, death, and burial are mentioned, and it's probably to do honor to the mother of the Hebrew people, because that is what she is known as. as a mother, just as we say Father Abraham. Well, it's not unusual for someone to say Mother Sarah. Chayei Sarah means the life of Sarah, and that's Roman numeral number 1. That is the first fill-in. Chayei Sarah means the life of Sarah. And, okay. Let me let somebody in real quick. Okay, the life of Sarah. Chayei Sarah should be right there on your, on the Roman numeral 1. And then that means the life of Sarah. I think it's ironic. I don't know if any of you saw that in this parashah. It's ironic that the parashah is titled The Life of Sarah, and it's actually is about the death of Sarah, So Sarah, like I said, Sarah is also the only woman whose name God changes. God changes her name. In Genesis 17, when Abram was 99 years old, God declared his new name Abraham, a father of many nations. And he gave him the covenant of circumcision. God gave Sarai the new name Sarah and blessed her. Sarai means princess, and Sarah means my princess. So Abraham was given assurance that Sarah would have a son, in chapter 17. So what we do know here is that Sarah did live 127 years, and that's in letter A. Sarah dies at 127. One thing I want to do is I want to talk a little bit about Sarah. I don't know if any of you've read anything about her, if you read the parashah, but there is, in the Bible, it's like there isn't a ton of stuff about Sarah, but yet Sarah is considered the mother of all of the nations, of all of us. Sarah was described as exceptionally beautiful, even as she aged. When they traveled to Egypt, Abraham said to her, and this is in Genesis 12, 11, 13, he says, I know that you are a woman beautiful to behold, and when the Egyptians see you, they will say, this is his wife. Then they will kill me, but they will let you live. Say that you are my sister, that it may go well with me because of you, and that my life may be spared on your account. So she was, even at the age where she was at, she was a beautiful woman. Her beauty was affirmed in Egypt, and she was taken into Pharaoh's harem, where she was protected by God, and the truth about her eventually came out. At least that's the way we feel, right, Bill? Not our brother Paul.
But it's a good thing Sharon wasn't here.
Esther,
Oh, you weren't here? Oh.
I weren't here. But how many months did Esther have to be in beautification process before she was allowed
wasn't
to
it
even enter the
a
kingdom?
year?
About a year.
About a year. Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I know it. I'm with you on that. Because we'd had an but there's different understandings out there. And that's what a midrash is all about. If you hear something, you could bring it out, and we'll discuss it. Doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to agree with it. So last week or a couple weeks ago, somebody brought out the idea that he was in Pharaoh's harem, and you know what went on there? Well, nothing. Okay, Pastor Bruce.
I was going to just mention that it's interesting that his response to Pharaoh checking out his wife, that could very easily be understood as a lack of faith in God. Could it not?
Yeah.
He says, I better lie here because they're going to kill me. So I think the point that I want to just throw out is this. When we have momentarily lapses, what we call lapse of faith in just daily things, it's not as important as our overall faith in the Lord. And what I mean by that is he never questioned the Lord. He's on a journey that the Lord directed him to be on. But along the way, he is challenged by different things. And we've studied the 10 tests of Abraham before, and he failed half of them.
Right.
So he's a man, he's the father of the faith. So I just wanted to point that out. Some people are very quick to say, well, you're lacking faith.
Mm-hmm.
Well, no, you're not lacking faith.
Right.
Your knees are a little shaky. There's a huge difference in that, guys, and we have to understand that.
Well, and I even thought about the fact that, there was a famine in the land and he went down to Egypt. How much faith would it have taken just to, hey, I'm going to stay put, the Lord will provide. But then you think about it, everything that belongs to Israel, from the Euphrates all the way up to north of Damascus, all the way to the Great Sea, all the way down to the Nile River, if he wouldn't have walked down to Egypt and laid his feet, because the word says that wherever you lay your feet, that land is yours. So it wouldn't have happened if he didn't go down to Egypt. I mean, there's different perspectives. Okay, somebody had the microphone. Maria.
Of course.
Maria's back.
Like you said, when I studied this, it's titled The Life of Sarah, yet it's only really one verse, and it's about her death.
Yeah.
So I checked into that, and it's deceiving where it says here in English, because in Hebrew it says, now Sarah lived 100 years and 20 years
Yes.
and 30 years.
7.
These are the life, this
Yeah.
is the years of Sarah. It's mentioned twice, and the rabbi says it's because she had a double life.
Mm.
When she was 100, she looked like she was 20.
20, yes.
And she had the beauty and the righteousness of a 20-year-old. And when she was 20, she had the beauty and the innocence of a 7-year-old. So
Right.
when I started to read on Sarah, like what the pastor was saying, many of the rabbis and sages say that her righteousness was greater than Abraham.
Yes. Yeah.
That she was more, that when she was in a crowd or walking through the tents or whatever, that she actually glowed with this righteousness. And that has the 3 attributes of the tent, that the candles in her tent never went out.
Right.
Which is one of the things that I was talking to Pastor Vince, that the Sabbath candles we should never blow out.
Right.
Because we are blowing out the light of
Right.
God.
Right.
So we should let them burn down. But her candles never burn down. Her bread, if she baked just one loaf, it was good and fresh for
Right.
the whole week, for 10 people or 100 people, just like in the temple.
Yep.
Just
Exactly.
like in the temple. And that there was a cloud
Yep.
over her tent. Now, all this righteousness, I would like for you to please tell me why Abraham did not go home after he bound up Isaac.
We'll get there.
Because
Because
I
you
couldn't
already,
find
you know
any
what?
place
I
that
might as well
justified
just rip out a page here because Maria already shared it. So no, but
Oh, I am studying on
you're
Sarah.
and I like that. when we have a parashah, read it. Go through and read it and look into it, you know. And yeah, and you know, if you have the Humash, let's see what Rashi has to say about it, you know, because and then you know, like we said before, you know, I have the Midrash, and I know Tila does, and there's some stuff in there that's you know, oh my gosh, you know, but that's what you want to do. You want to study the Word. Okay, but aside from her, oh, Bill, you were going to say something. Go ahead.
Yeah,
No, okay. Not yet.
she took my time.
Okay.
Marries a hard act to follow.
You know, but like I said, I'm going to cover more on Sarah. Go ahead, Dorothy.
Oh, I just was going to insert, the Jews let
Use the microphone.
So the people in Zoom land can hear.
the Jewish people let the candles burn down overnight after they have their meal, and the candles, they let them burn down, but I've never heard of them keeping it going continually. Now, they do have a tradition of an eternal light, but in this day and age, people don't use candles for that. They use lamps, they use electricity.
Well, yeah.
So,
Well, that's the miracle that Maria's talking about. For all of us, the traditionally, when you light Shabbat candles, you do not blow them out. You let them burn, and they're going to go out on their own.
We just
Okay.
blow them out because the dancers are going by and we don't want to burn
Yeah.
the building down.
Yeah, and that's you know, that's the only reason that you know. And then there's been times where it's dripping, and then the flame is dripping along with it, so we just blow it out. So like he says, we don't want a fire to start. So, but traditionally, you let them blow themselves out or burn themselves out. And also, that was the miracle with Sarah. She would light them, and they would stay lit throughout the Sabbath. You know, the whole, 24-hour period.
The whole week.
A whole week?
The whole
Yeah.
week.
So, boy, she never had to go out and buy candles.
No.
But aside from her attractiveness, Sarah was also barren. So we know that. She was barren until her covenant with God, where God promised to give her a child. Okay, it was because of this covenant that her name was changed to Sarah, from Sarai to Sarah. True to his word, Sarah got pregnant and gave birth to Isaac. Okay, we read here that Sarah died at age 127 and was buried in Kiryat Arba, presently located in Hebron. Back in that time, this was probably the name of that city, Kiryat Arba. There's 3 separate times in the book of Joshua, it tells us that the city of Kiryat Arba was named after the ruler of that city, a man called Arba, and he was a powerful giant, or either the father of giants. So there were giants in the land. And it also says that it's Caleb who defeats the giants, or the giants in the city. You know, on a side note, when he took over, he requested that land, the mountain there, and it was given to him, and he drove them out. Well, he defeated them. He was 85 years old when he did that. So Caleb, and there's other writings about that, how strong he was even at 85 years old. Well, we know that about Moses too. Well, we know that Moses died at 120, but it was only 4 or 5 years before that he took out the giant Og. He took him out himself, and so he must have been about anywhere 115 years old. So we do know that even though they were up in age, they were still strong. They still had everything. Their eyes weren't dimmed. There was so much. Okay, so The cave of Machpelah, commonly known today as the cave of the patriarchs. You know, and what else do we know about our matriarch? Does anybody have anything else that they want to share about Sarah? Okay. Okay, number one, Abraham mourns her passing.
Spencer, you gonna share about the hay in the name?
Go ahead and share that. No, I wasn't.
When Sarah's name is changed from Sarai to Sarah, and Avram's name is changed from Avram to Abraham, what happens is you add into those names, you add the letter Hey. And the letter Hey, it represents in Hebrew the breath of God. So this is a picture of them being born again. So the Hey is found twice in God's personal name, Yud Hey, Vav Hey.
Right.
And so when you add in that Hey, when you add in the breath of God, you have a new creation in the Lord. And so that's what that's a picture of, is that new creation. So I just thought I'd add that.
No, that's good. That's good. You know, her burial is the first one to be mentioned in the Bible. She is buried in the cave of the patriarchs, and the tradition says that both Abraham and Sarah, as well as Isaac and Rebekah, and Jacob and Leah, as well as Adam and Eve, are all buried there. Okay. She was 10 years younger than Abraham, what we know about her. And she married him in Ur of the Chaldees, and you could find that in Genesis 11, 29 to 31. I'll tell you about, she was Abraham's wife when they were married. She was Abraham's half-sister, and you could find that in Genesis 20:12. So when when he says that, say that you are my sister, it's like a half truth. You know, it's not a, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they had the same.
Her father was Abraham's brother.
Let's
That would
see.
make her a niece.
No, I don't think it was a niece. I think it was more of.
Some of the rabbis say that the father had another wife, and that's where she came from.
Uh-huh.
But when you read in the book of Jubilees, she was the daughter of his brother, Haram, not the daughter of his father,
Who, Sarah?
Sarah.
Sarah.
I
Sarah.
thought it was the same,
The same.
different.
And Lot was her
wait,
brother.
Same, no, different father.
Same
Same
father, different mother.
There you
Yeah.
go.
No, no.
Well, according to me.
So according to the book of Jubilee and the other ancient books and sages,
Right.
it was she was the daughter of Haram, the brother, which
Okay.
would
No.
make her the niece.
See, and that's why it's important to just, get in there and, check it out. Okay, Sarah is mentioned in the Tanakh in Isaiah 51:2 as the mother of the chosen race. In fact, what I did is some of these, and then, if you want to write this down on your notes there, in the Bri Hadashah, she is mentioned in Romans 4:19. She's mentioned in Romans 9:9. Sarah is mentioned in Galatians chapter 4:21 to 5:1. It's all about Sarah and Hagar. In Hebrews 11:11, Sarah is also mentioned, and Peter mentions Sarah in 1 Peter 3:6. Okay, 1 Peter 3:6 and Hebrews 11:11. In fact, in Romans 4:19 it says, without becoming weak in faith, he contemplated his own body, now as good as dead, since he was about 100 years old, and the deadness of Sarah's womb. They mentioned Sarah. In Romans 9:9 it says, for this is the word of promise. At this time I will come, and Sarah will have a son. There's some things that in Torah that we don't hear about Sarah, but then later on in the Brit Hadashah, it is mentioned, especially this in Galatians 4:21, it speaks about the free woman Sarah and the slave woman Hagar. So that's when somebody says, well, she was a woman of faith and this, and it doesn't say that specifically in Genesis, but it does say it later on. Okay, in Hebrews 11:11, by faith even Sarah herself received ability to conceive, even beyond the proper time of life, since she considered him faithful who had promised. 1 Peter 3:6, just as Sarah obeyed Abraham, calling him Lord, and you have proved to be her children if you do what is right without being frightened by any fear. So Sarah, we do see that Sarah, even though she dies, her legacy or everything about her just lives on. Okay, and like I told you, and then in the Midrash says along with her husband Abraham, Sarah was instrumental in teaching thousands of people about the belief in one God. Okay, what it said is that Abraham would be teaching the men, and Sarah would influence the women. And we touched on that a couple of parashahs ago. In fact, I think didn't Pastor Paul share that in his message? Sarah was, and then the other thing we know about Sarah was known for her kindness and hospitality. Sarah welcomed with open arms all who visit the tent. Her and Abraham. I don't know about you, but there's so many times we've talked about this, that when you're married, there's just things that you and your spouse are just alike, And I know that Peggy and I, we find that we have really grown together, in 7 years plus now, we've just grown that there's a lot of things that we both do. In fact, the kids will even say something like, that's what Dad told me. You've been talking to him. Well, yeah, she's been talking to me for 47 years now. So. Plus.
Nothing says 48.
48? Are we at 48 now? Oh. Okay. Oh, we're at 48. Okay.
Plus the school years.
Yeah. Yeah, plus all the years we were together during school, so it goes way back. The rabbis also tell us God told Abraham to listen to Sarah, and that just as Maria said earlier, because she was a greater prophet than he. Okay, when Sarah was 127 years old and her son Isaac was 37. So there goes that whole idea of when the binding of Isaac, that he was just a little boy, So God commanded Abraham to sacrifice his beloved Isaac on the altar. Abraham took his son, went to Mount Moriah to bring him as a sacrifice. As he was about to slaughter the son, promised to him by God, an angel stopped him, telling him, stop. So God never really, in my feeling, well, you probably feel the same way, God never intended for Isaac to be slaughtered. That is one understanding. But rather testing him, wanting Abraham to demonstrate his unwavering love for the Lord and his loyalty, and he was. So Abraham had now proved that he was indeed God-fearing. So when Sarah heard about, and then this is what you'll read in the Midrash too, but when Sarah heard about that her son almost died, it was too much for her to bear. Sarah died at the age of 127. So let's do a couple more fill-ins. In letter B, Roman numeral 1, letter B, Sarah, the only woman in the Bible who God changes her name. The fill-ins are only and changes. Letter C, Sarah was known for her kindness and hospitality. And then what we just talked about in letter D, the Midrash. It says, when Sarah heard that Isaac was going to be sacrificed, she died. The Bible indicates that Sarah died of natural causes. I'd like to tell you a little story here, what the Midrash actually says. I don't know if Tila read it, but the Midrash says that Satan came to Sarah and told her about what was happening. Sarah didn't believe Satan. So she contacted a few of the giants that lived in the land and told them, can you please look out over the hills to Mount Moriah and tell me what's going on over there. So the giants looked and they said, we see a man on the hill about to sacrifice his son. And it was just too much for her to bear, and she died. So that's what the Midrash says. In a nutshell. Okay, instead of talking about Sarah's death, I felt because of the title of this Torah portion, we should begin with Sarah's life. And like I said, if you guys read anything else about Sarah, just go ahead and bring it up. But, we can now move on. After crying and mourning for Sarah, and we find that in Genesis 23, 1 and 2, Abraham approaches the local people of Kiryat Arba to negotiate for a burial plot. Okay, the locals are called the Hittites, or the sons of Heth, and are the designated people of the land. It was about 60 years ago that they said they haven't found, even though it says Hittites, they hadn't found any indication that there were people like that in the land. But it's just been since about 40 to 60 years ago that archaeologists have in fact found areas there where, yes, there were people called Hittites that were living in the land. So there again, it proves that the Bible is correct. Go ahead, Bill.
This isn't real ground shaking, but one of the problems with that, I mean, they couldn't prove that David lived until about 30 years ago. I mean, they didn't have any proof. I mean, the history is so accurate, you wonder why somebody would question it. But when we were kids, we used to find arrowheads. Every time the farmers would turn over their field, we'd go out and collect arrowheads. And think about that. Arrowheads take a lot of time to build, to make.
Right.
And here we are 100 years after Indians lived in that land, and we find arrowheads every time a farmer plows, okay?
Yeah.
So some people speculate there could have been millions.
Right.
And some have just disappeared into the annals of history, maybe not, nobody even knows they ever existed, Yeah. So I think that's kind of the situation over there, why so much stuff, maybe they haven't tied all the loose ends together because people just disappear into the dust,
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, we're going to get into like the purchasing of the burial site for Sarah, and and to this day, there's still conflict there because they're saying that the Jews have no right to this land; it never belonged to them, but yet it's bogus. There's there's areas there that we're going to cover that have been purchased, and then like we said earlier, the word tells us Abraham was spoken to by the Lord, and he said, anywhere you set your feet, that land is yours. So now you see why from the southern edge of the Euphrates River, he went all the way up to its water source, and then went back over down to Damascus, down into the land of Canaan, all the way down to Egypt, all the way back up, and all that land in reality belongs to Israel. But and if you've looked at a map of Israel of today, boy, it's only just maybe 1/10 of that portion, or
At its narrowest point, it's only 9 miles across.
9 miles across at its narrowest
Right in the
point.
middle.
And to think that the West Bank, the Muslims want the West Bank. Now imagine how thin that area is going to be, So that's a whole nother midrash, but that's why it's very important that the Jews never give up any land, So, and we used to have a president that agreed with that. So, this midrash interpretation highlights the unusual nature of this chapter with the lengthy description of Abraham's purchase, because we're going to get now into the purchase, and that's in Roman numeral 2. Abraham buys the cave of Machpelah and the surrounding fields. I know I'm going to get to the price, with the 400 shekels, silver shekels, and it's odd how there's different variations of what that whole price could be by today's standard, but it is a huge amount of money considering the area that they bought. But then again, we really don't know. Pastor Bruce was sharing how when you do buy property, you need to walk the property line. You need to know what exactly is yours, and we don't have any indication here that Abraham did that. So go ahead, Maria.
I did a study on the cave, and it seems that the people who owned it, they were Canaanites, descendants from Ham, and to them it was just a field with trees, and a cave that was so dark that they were afraid to enter it because of the darkness of this cave. And the name of the cave, it means double. So it was a double cave, whether it was side by side or on top of each other. But Shem told Abraham about this cave. And when Abraham entered it, he found the body of Adam and Eve, which is why he wanted to buy that cave so he could bury his wife and himself later.
Right. No, I've read that too, and also one of the commentaries say that not that he found the bodies of Adam and Eve, but there was such a fragrance flowing from that cave that he could smell the fragrance of the Garden of Eden. So he knew that is exactly where Adam and Eve were buried.
And it says that this was a holy place where the Jews would go to and pray, but Suleiman the Magnificent of the Ottoman Empire built a fence around it and a fortress type over the cave to forbid any Jews to enter it. And I think the pastor told us once what the Arabs have done to that cave.
Right.
Or to that building, that they defaced it and threw garbage and...
Totally decimated.
Oh, yeah, just like Joseph's burial site. They've done the same thing there. Same thing when you go to Bethlehem with Rachel's tomb. You know, anything that that is Hebrew, they want to destroy. You know, just to get rid of any trace that they were there. Yeah. Go ahead, Sharon.
Just a question. Did they destroy the fortress that Suleiman put around it?
Well,
Or,
Herod.
and the cave?
Well, I do know.
He built the cave, the fortress on top of the cave. So if you go there today, if you go there today, I think it's just like the Temple Mount. You go into a building and the cave is under it, so you have to go under to enter the cave. I don't know if the bodies are still there.
Well, they've
don't
been
know.
hidden. What
Did
they
destroy
say.
the building? Yeah.
No. What I understand is Herod built put a building there on the top of the cave of Machpelah, or right outside of it. And to this day, well, not to this day, later that building was used as a Christian church. And now today, I think it's being used as a mosque. It was, it's being used as a mosque.
Suleiman not only messed up that grave, but he went to the Temple Mount and rebuilt part of the eastern wall, and he was the one that sealed up the gate.
Right.
So none of the Jews could go through that eastern gate, and put a cemetery there.
Yeah. But, you know, even to this day, people still go to the cave. Not inside of it, because there's like a arch there, or like a door type, you know, so they go up there and they pray. I was reading, I forget what the figures were, they're not exact, but in that area, they say there's about like 20,000 Muslims that live there and 600 Jews. You know, so, you know how that goes. But
318, remember? Against
Yeah.
the army of Syria.
yeah, and it may have been because you know, the name of Eleazar, and we're gonna get to that. His name is what not friend of God, but well, we'll get there. The Midrash interpretation highlights, like I said, the unusual nature of this chapter with the lengthy description of Abraham's purchase. We're going to go paragraph after paragraph on everything that went on. That's what your Bible has. It's a lengthy discussion of what went on with Abraham and the owner of that property. The negotiations basically go like 3 rounds. Abraham states explicitly that he is seeking a permanent right to the land. He is not asking merely to let me bury my wife there. He wants to own that property. And we can understand why. If it was the Lord or an angel or whatever, or Shem, because you have to understand, with Shem was a son of Noah. Here we are 10 generations later, and you're thinking to yourself, how could Shem teach Abraham or show Abraham? Well, Abraham was alive for a short period of time. Shem was alive during the time of Abraham. So it's not impossible. And Shem is known to be teaching one God, and he taught that to Abraham and Sarah. Okay, and like I said, he's not asking just that he could bury his wife there and, they can still own the property. He wants that land. The Hittites, like Abraham, avoid the term to sell. I don't know if you noticed that. They didn't want to sell. They wanted to give it to him. But Abraham wanted to purchase it so he could bury Sarah there. The Hittite spokesperson is non-committal. They do not say yes or no, but leave the matter if you notice that, they just leave it hanging in the air. This approach assumes that the Hittites wish to avoid the transfer of property rights to a non-native residence. Even though Abraham was there, if you read it, it says that he was a sojourner. You know, he considered himself an outsider, even though he was there living in the land. You know, we don't know if this was the custom of the time, you know, because I'm just speculating that, you know, maybe they just didn't want to sell the land. They knew that he was an outsider. They liked him because one thing about, you know, it's something that we even see today. That land was being blessed. And it was being blessed because of Abraham and Sarah and nothing else, you know. It's just like today. The Gaza, which is a desolated area now, used to be rich in produce. The ground could grow whatever you desire to plant. It was a wonderful area, and that's why the Muslims want that land. Well, once they drove all the Jews out, well, now nothing grows there, you know. And we read about this. Has anybody ever been to Jericho, the land right around Jericho? I mean, there's a lot of dry land there. Nothing grows. We talked about down by the Dead Sea. That used to be a fertile area. You know, not anymore. You know, it seems like, you know, once the Jews move out, then the life of the land moves out. And so we do know that this is the attitude, though, of the Israelites to their own land, and we find that out elsewhere in the Bible. You know, the Israelites, they would rather sell their property to another Israelite, you know, not to a foreigner. But one thing we do know is the Hittites of that land, before he purchases it, they were polite to Abraham. They treated him very well. Okay. All right, then comes the second round, so to speak. And the second round of negotiations, Abraham bows and he's being polite. Okay. It's not like I don't think it's like the bow of Barack Obama when he bowed to all the Muslims. It was more like submitting. But this was more of being polite. The negotiations go back and forth, and Abraham names a specific plot that he wants, indicating that he will pay the full value of it given to him. The Midrash says, and this is where I got it, the Midrash says this field and cave was shown to Abraham, and like I said, a sweet smell of Gan Eden resonated from it. Abraham knew that this is where Adam and Eve were buried. At all costs, this is the property Abraham wanted to purchase. He didn't want any other part of this area in Hebron. That was the area he wanted. Okay, now here comes round 3. The price is revealed as 400 shekels. Okay. The rabbis say that was a very expensive price for that property. But Abraham, if you notice, he doesn't counter. He pays the full asking price. I was looking into it, and it says the field at 400 shekels, silver shekels, today would have been $128,000 by today's standard for this property. Go ahead, Maria.
With the money, with 30 shekels, you could buy a full-grown ox. Top of the line virgin.
Uh-huh. Do we really want to go there, Maria?
For marriage. Was 100 shekels. A slave you could buy for 17 shekels. David bought the Temple Mount for 50 shekels.
Right.
So you can imagine what 400 shekels that was really, what, triple, quadruple the price
Boy,
of
he
what
could
the
have,
land
yeah, he
was
could have,
worth.
for 400 shekels, he could have bought the valley and everything else, you know, but,
Now we can't buy anything in today's economy.
yeah.
Tip-top version.
Yeah, yeah. I was just thinking, okay, 100 shekels for a tip-top version.
Slightly virgin.
That kind of reminds me of that T-shirt that it says something like, the lady is elderly and she has a T-shirt on it. It says, "I am a virgin," and then underneath it says, "This is a very old shirt." Okay, so let's get away from that kind of talk. Go ahead, Bill.
I just reminded of the Indians sold Manhattan for some beads.
Oh,
Then
that's,
later we
you're not
found
on.
out a group of Indians sold Manhattan for just a bunch of beads.
right.
And we thought, the stupid Indians, you know. Later we found out they didn't own the land at all.
Who was stupid?
Stupid white man.
Oh, that's good. That's good. You know, it's just like, I mean, you know, any of you that have studied history, especially American history, you know, the Indians would also purchase, like, you know, those great pots and pans. Whoa, you know, it was something that was new to them, and you know, so they'd purchase things like that, and we'd just say, oh, they're ridiculous. Well, they're not. They're feeding their families, and you know, and it made it much easier. But as was likely the norm in ancient times, no mention is made of a written contract, and that is why there's a lot of problems. Bill or Brian, were you going to say something?
Well,
Oh, here, use the mic.
my question is up to speculation, and it's kind of lengthy, but did Ephron, the Bible says that Ephron didn't want to sell him the land, wanted to give it to him
Right.
at first. But then I'm wondering, did he name such a high price so that his people wouldn't think that he's just giving their land to a foreigner, and name the high price hoping that because it was such a high price that Abraham would accept the gift and not
Right.
pay for it?
You know,
There's some bargaining going on there.
well, but I wonder if all this went on for today. You know, in other words, we can look back and we can see that Abraham purchased the property. Yeah, the Muslims are saying that we have the people have no right to the land, you know, but it's been proven in the Word that yes, they own the land. It's not that they don't have any right to it; they own it, you know. So I wonder if all this is written because of future generations that are going to dispute, you know, that claim, and it's being disputed. Go ahead, Sharon.
That may be, but I don't think Ephron ever wanted to gift
Yeah.
the land to Abraham. But culturally, in that culture, if you desire something, it's their culture to say it's yours, you know, and not ask for any kind of money. So they had to start out by saying, what is this between, you know, you and me? You take the land. But then they knew it would get beyond that.
Right, right. Peggy?
Unmute Bonnie and then Ken.
Okay, Bonnie, unmute yourself and you go first. Ladies first, Kent.
I have a question where it says, and Abraham listened to Ephron, and Abraham weighed out for Ephron the silver which he had named in the hearing of the sons of Heth for 400 shekels. Now, would that be considered a verbal contract?
That is definitely a verbal contract. And when you read there, I was trying to get to it. It says at the gate. There's somewhere in this chapter at the gate. What that is insinuating is there were people there. There were witnesses all around to witness this transaction. So yes, that was a verbal contract. So everybody there knew that from that point on, the land did not belong to Ephraim. The land belonged to Abraham. So yeah, good question.
Okay,
Okay, Kent, go ahead and unmute yourself. You still there, Kent?
Yes, yes. Okay. Islam, Arabs are an Abrahamic religion. They believe in Abraham very much. So therefore, the dispute is not related to Jew versus Arab. It's just, if it's Abraham, it's ours, and that's all there is to it. You see, that's all.
Yeah, but that's where the mother.
They say.
Yeah, that's what they say. Yeah, and that's where Mother Sarah comes in, because they don't have a line going back to Sarah. You know, they go back to Hagar, okay, or Katura, and we'll get to that in a bit.
yeah, but the promise went to Isaac, right?
That is correct. That is correct. From Isaac handed down to Jacob, all the way to the Mashiach. So, thanks for those comments, you guys, and the questions. So, Ephron's sale of his land rights to Abraham is narrated as an oral contract with, like I said, and the being at the gate with all these witnesses there, the Hittite witnesses, they both, they agreed to the term. Abraham did not, when he came out and said 400, he may have said 400 shekels, knowing that, maybe he'll counter and I'll settle at 200 shekels or something, or 250, whatever. While Abraham, he didn't want any of that. In front of everybody, they were probably amazed. I would imagine that the people that were there were amazed, like, boy, this guy Abraham must be a fool, paying that kind of money for this. But they were all witnesses of this verbal agreement. So the cave and the land now belongs to Abraham, and he could now bury Sarah. How much land was along with that? We don't know. We really don't know. But apparently, I don't know if it was a huge piece of land, but it's Abraham who owned it. Go ahead, Brian. Do you have the mic?
By Abraham paying that full price, that was a statement of Sarah's worth to him.
You know what? You're absolutely right, and also the fact that that she was buried, because that's one thing in the Hebrew faith or Jewish faith is they bury their dead. Okay, it would have been much easier, I guess, if he would have cremated her, but that isn't the policy or the history of the Jewish faith. They don't cremate; they bury their loved ones. So, and that's even to this day. So, this is one of 3 places that the nations of the world cannot charge Israel. Oh, go ahead, Sharon, and then I'll go on.
I was just going to say that even in King Saul's time, when his body and Jonathan's were hung up, they took them down and they did burn them, but they didn't burn them completely. They buried the bones afterwards.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, even to this day too, there's many times they bury them, but then they'll come back later, and you're right, and then they uncover it, and then they get all the bones, and they put all the family, generations of the family, they put all their bones together. Ossuary, yeah. So there's
Weird.
Yeah, that's weird. Just bury them and leave them there, huh? Well, it was just, how many years ago was it when they started, I don't know if they're running out of room, but, when they started, on top of each other. Yeah, for many years, it was never like that. So it's only been about, what would we say, maybe the last 40 years or something.
do it for married couples.
Married couples, yeah. 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 Mom and dad are side by side, right? No, they're on top of each other. That's right. Yeah, mom and dad. So, yeah, I mean, you know, I guess save money or it's so expensive to bury a person these days anyway. But this is one of the three places that the nations of the world cannot charge Israel to say to them that you've stolen this land. And that is what's going on today. Israel is being accused of stealing this land. I just, you know, I'm dumbfounded when I hear politicians tell Israel what they cannot and what they can and cannot do, you know. And then in their land, it's going crazy, you know. So, but the three places are the cave of Machpelah, the Temple Mount, and the burial plot of Joseph. The cave of Machpelah, Abraham paid Ephron, and we just read that here in Genesis 23:16. The Temple Mount, David, he paid for it in 1 Chronicles 21:25. If you want to write that down, he bought the Temple Mount. Okay,
What was the price?
Oh, for David, I think what was it, 50 shekels. 50 shekels for the Temple Mount.
First Chronicles what?
1 Chronicles 21:25. Is there?
Yeah. That's a study for another day though.
Yeah.
It all works out though, it's not a contradiction.
You know, but we know for a fact it was purchased. You know, the burial plot of Joseph, and that's in Genesis 33:19. And it says, and he bought the field. Genesis 33:19. So these are three areas there that are, you know, with the Muslims, it's being disputed, but it's written that they were purchased. Go ahead, Bill.
I'm not sure in the world forum, and that doesn't matter, that we're ever gonna win the battle. That
Yeah, you're right.
Israel has a right to this land. The bottom line is, I'm not sure there's anybody on the planet that's living on land that's been theirs since the beginning. So it's basically who controls the land now, whatever the circumstances were, some good, some bad, whatever. But the country that controls that land is now the country that you gotta deal with.
Yeah, exactly. No, you're right. I was just going to throw in that 26200 Augusta Drive is owned by Vince and Peggy Armijo.
Stop making payments on it, you'll see who owns it.
Kent has a question.
You're right. And you know, and even when it's paid off, stop paying the taxes and we'll see who owns it. Yeah. Okay, and Roman numeral 2.
Kent has a question.
Oh, wait, hold on. Roman numeral 2, letter A, the three key places our forefathers purchased: Machpelah, the Temple Mount, and Joseph's burial place. Okay, so everybody, we're all caught up?
Where was that?
What's that? Joseph's
He
tomb?
was buried in Egypt.
No, they picked up the bones and they...
Oh, not Joseph, I meant,
What was the first word on A?
yeah.
Machpelah. It's the cave of Machpelah. Machpelah. Then the second one was the Temple Mount and Joseph's burial place.
What was number two?
Okay.
Number two, I'm sorry.
No, the first one, number 2, was Abraham buys the cave of Machpelah and the surrounding fields.
Thank you.
Okay, Kent, before you go, Bill had his hands up. Go ahead.
Sorry, Ken. I thought recent archaeologists, there was a big deal that they couldn't find Joseph and they doubted that he lived, and then all of a sudden they went back another 300 years or something, and they found 12 tombs, and one was like a pyramid.
And that one was empty. They did. Archaeologists, they found an area where all the the brothers would have been buried in Egypt. And when they found this one little section, they knew that it was a very important person that was buried there, the most important of all the brothers, some high official. Or well, when they went in there, they found they found like a statue that had been destroyed, but parts of it were multiple colors, the coat of many colors.
So
But
the brothers were
they-
buried in Egypt, and Joseph, like Sharon said,
Joseph
was taken out.
That's correct. His bones were taken out. And that's that one area the archaeologists say they could not find any bones there. It was empty. Yep. Okay, Kent, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Okay, I'm unmuted. Yeah, so the whole thing is Arabs do not take the mother. It goes with the father. So
Right.
Abraham is the father. The mother has nothing to do with it. If you remember in the movie, Not Without My Daughter, she took her daughter and fled back to the United States.
Yeah, you're right. I remember.
And I think our present government would probably have her extradited to Tehran today to be prosecuted for kidnapping.
Hey, you know what? Out in the airwaves, you just gave our present government some ideas. You don't want to do that, Kent. Good going, Kent. Thank you for sharing that, Kent. Okay, anyone else before I move on? Okay, now let's move on to chapter 24. Okay, in chapter 24, we meet Abraham's trusted servant. Here in chapter 24, the servant's name is never mentioned. Any of you in your Bibles, does anybody have a complete Jewish Bible? I was just wondering.
Yes.
I'm wondering, does it give a name? Does it say Eleazar?
Where's that at?
That would be chapter 24, right there near chapter 1, verse 2.
There's Abraham said to the servant who had served him the longest, who was
Okay.
in charge of his own.
Okay, so it does say servant. Okay, all right. So that's,
Not a name though.
but there's no name. There is no name mentioned. But then you wonder, well, then how did the rabbis get to Eleazar? Okay, we would have to go all the way back to chapter 15. So let's go back to chapter 15 in Genesis. Okay, and we'd have to find out who was Abraham's most faithful servant. In chapter 15, verse 2 and 3, it says, "But Abram said, Lord God, what will you give me, since I am childless? And the heir of my house is Eleazar of Damascus. Abram also said, Since you have given me no son, one who has been born in my house is my heir." Okay, so why would Abraham, most trusted servant, go nameless in this chapter? Anybody have an idea? Why, we find out now that it's Eleazar is his most trusted servant, but he goes nameless in this chapter. Aha, let's see what the rabbis have to say. After Eleazar had encountered Rebekah and realizes that she was the one he was sent to find, he requested permission from her father and brother that she return with him to marry Isaac. His initial statement to them is this: "I am a servant of Abraham." And indeed, throughout the journey, he is constantly referred to as the servant. By his name not being mentioned, we learn that this was not about Eleazar, the person. This was about the mission. I think it's mentioned many times. It's all about the journey. This mission was more important than the person that was there going to get Isaac a wife. Eleazar was so dedicated to Abraham that at no time did his own self-interest get in the way of fulfilling that mission. He was a mere servant, an extension, and what the rabbi said, and when he was there, he was an extension of Abraham's hand. It was as though Abraham was there.
He was a Gentile?
He was a Gentile, yeah. Now think about it. Here is Eleazar at one time. We read in chapter 15 that at one time he is the heir of everything that Abraham owned. Okay, Pastor Bruce?
The word that's used in 24:2 for servant is the word Eved or Oved, which we get, that's what our shamashim are called,
Yeah.
Ovedim.
Ovedim.
Comes from this word, highly trusted servant.
Amen.
Ovedim.
Amen.
And one that's doing the Lord's work, not just a worker.
Right. I can think of an Ovedim in this room, and her name is Felicia.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh. I mean,
So much for that position.
a trusted servant. A trusted servant. Okay, Sharon, go ahead.
Well, even if this parasha is not really about him, it speaks volumes about him. And there's a couple things. Most of it is good.
Yes.
He will not rest until he finds out the answer that he needs.
Right.
But reading in the Midrash too, before he left, one of the things he said, well, what if the girl would not come back with me? And he was hoping that Isaac would marry his own daughter.
You got it. Yep.
So there was
did anybody else read that?
a little negative
right.
in there, but yeah, but
Yeah.
most of it was really good.
Yeah, because what Sharon's sharing here is Eleazar had a daughter himself. And that is why you read this comment. Well, what if she doesn't come back? Well, if she doesn't come back with him, well, whoa, then, my daughter can marry Isaac, but yeah, I caught that too. Go ahead, Maria.
A little history on Eleazar. He was a royal servant in the house of the king. And when Abraham was asked to leave the country of Ur, the king gave Eleazar to Abraham. So he was from a royal setting,
Right.
but he was still a servant.
Right. Well, and he was very good at it. I mean, that's just something that we should emulate in serving our Lord.
And the king was Nimrod.
Yeah, I read that too. So after the birth of Isaac, so to speak, Eleazar lost everything. His inheritance that was going to be given to him. Well, after Isaac's birth, it's no longer there. To Eleazar, his task of finding a wife for his master's son was his goal, and that was what took up all his time. And one thing you'll find out, one characteristic of Eleazar's mission was his tremendous focus. He was focused on this task. When he arrived, he didn't first go around town to see the local attractions or go around town and, hey, I'm going to look at all the women first, or, it says that he didn't even check into a place to rest his head. Immediately he went straight to work, starting his search for Isaac's future wife. Go ahead, Maria.
I had a huge problem with this part, because from what I read, the carrying of the water, watering the camels, and deciding, yes, I'm going to go and make this journey and marry this man. I pictured a 16, 17, 18-year-old girl, but I read that some of the rabbis said that she was 3, 4 years old.
No, she was not. The thing too is there were many miracles that went on during this time.
That's a miracle.
Okay, that would have been, you're right. But there were many miracles. It is, the rabbis say that when she went to go get the water, if you ever get to go to Israel, one thing you'll do is we went to some of these places where you can look down and you can see the steps that go all the way down where they would draw the water. I mean, you're talking about at least, I don't know, to me it looked like about 40 feet, something like that.
Oh, it's at least 40 feet down.
At least 40 feet
Hundreds
down.
of steps.
Yeah.
Narrow steps.
And then,
Right.
yeah, you're right. Well, the steps are, they're blocked off. You can't even do it because if, people probably slip and fall. But when we were there, we saw that and everything. But one of the miracles, they said when Rebecca went to draw the water for Eleazar and for the camels, the water rose. So all she had to do was just this instead of having to walk down the steps. There's one of the miracles. There are other miracles, and I'll touch on one of them in a little bit. But yes.
One of the interesting things about Eleazar is in verse 9 of this chapter, this is not verse 9, verse 12. This is the very first mention of somebody praying to God.
Oh,
the Father.
yes.
So this is a picture of the Shadchan. The Shadchan is the helper, or as we would know it, the spirit of the living God. So this is the Shadchan, and of course today a modern day matchmaker uses a Shadchan to find the wife.
Right.
That's the term that's used. And so this is the very first mention. It says, and he said, "O Lord, the God of my master Abraham, please grant me success today and show loving kindness to my master Abraham." This is the basis for all prayer after this point.
Amen. Amen.
It
You're
comes
right.
from the servant, not from Abraham.
You're right. Because it says in verse 12, then he prayed, "O Lord God of my master Abraham." So he's praying to the God of Abraham. "Give me success today and show kindness to my master Abraham." He's not asking for success for himself. He's asking success for his master. I don't know about you, and I don't know if you've ever thought about this, but have any of you thought that, like me and Peggy, I've always wondered that, I've always told people this was a match that the Lord put together. It wasn't, I think if it was just me or just her, I think we would have blown it. But I really think that the Lord brought us together, and that's just with her and I. Maybe some of you might agree with the relationship you have. And I think many of you would that have been married for a very long time. You're not married, 50 years or more without the Lord being involved in that marriage.
I got a better deal than Sharon did.
We agree with you, Bill.
First time in history, we agree.
There's no argument there. Okay.
What Pastor Bruce said, the overall theme, would that be Jew and Gentile coming together?
Oh, that's a perspective.
That could very well be, because the Jew and Gentile go all the way back to the beginning.
Yeah, you'll see the Jew and Gentile. The theme of the Jew and Gentile is the one you meant all the way back to the very beginning of time. Abraham before this was a Gentile.
Right.
He became Hebrew when he crossed over and obeyed God. And
right.
In my understanding, that is the very birth of the Jewish genetic gene. That he was literally transformed into a new creation at that point and became a Jew. Because Jews have DNA markers, so where did that start?
Yep.
Because Adam wasn't a Jew.
Right.
Adam was.
Well, and even we talked about the cave of Machpelah, the people that are buried there. The Jews would tell you that the Jewish patriarchs and matriarchs are buried there. Adam and Eve weren't Jewish, so, just throw that in there. Go ahead, Ed.
Well, we know God is always speaking, so I believe that, Abraham was just the first guy to say yes.
Yeah.
And it changed the DNA of mankind.
And you're right. I wonder if, we would never know, but did anybody else, did he ask, we know with the Jewish people, or the Hebrew people, they're the only ones that said yes. Everybody else turned down God. I wonder if anybody else turned down God, but Abraham didn't. Use me, Lord. So, okay, in Roman numeral 3, Abraham sends his servant to find Isaac a wife. And then what we're going to see now in letter A, the God of Abraham is with Eleazar. Even after he found Rebekah and deemed her worthy of his master's son, he still didn't allow himself to relax. When we read on, it says that, it says when he was invited to Rebekah's home and the entire family sat down to eat, he proclaimed, I will not eat until I have spoken my words. And then he went on, I am Abraham's servant, and he let them know why he was there. And we read where Rebekah's family requested that she be given time to prepare herself for marriage. And in other words, it seemed like a reasonable demand that, hey, let us have time with her and whatever, and then she can go with you. But Eleazar responded, do not delay me. Send me away, and I will go to my master. And Eleazar got his way. And the reason is that they even asked Rebekah, well, will you go with him now? And Rebekah said yes. Yeah. So go ahead, Pastor Bruce.
Yeah, and that ties in with Brit Hadashah, the New Testament, where the rich man comes to Yeshua. He wants to follow him, but he says, let me go bury my father first. And Yeshua says, no, right now. And so the Lord is trying to paint that picture for us that this thing called salvation, this thing called coming to the Lord, is of imperative importance. Yeah. Because you don't know, tomorrow is not guaranteed, obviously. So it's interesting how you see these parallels in the Brit Hadashah.
There's a lot of people that think that, the thief on the cross, it'll be a last second thing. Let me go out and have all my fun and then I'll accept the Lord. You're not guaranteed that. Go ahead, Maria.
I would like to know why Abraham sent his servant all the way back to Babylon to get a bride, considering that the family was still idolaters. They did not believe in the one true God. The rabbis said that in the whole family, Rebekah was the only one that had a core of righteousness.
And she was a virgin. At her age, she was 100 shekels.
Pastor Bruce, real quick, when you get on there, Pastor Paul is saying he can't hear you when you're speaking, so maybe it's not loud enough, as you say.
Okay. Yeah, I thought it was, but let's see, what was I going to say now?
About the family. So.
Oh yeah, he tells his servant not to pick a bride from his own family, from his own blood, and you have to realize and remember that we're dealing with the Canaanites here. These are giants.
Right.
No, they're not all giants. We know that even when Goliath went against David, he was all the rest of the Philistines they weren't giants, but they were the giant tribe.
Right.
And so the Hittites are one of the giant tribes. So he's doing business with the giants. That's why even the Midrash, when it talks about sending the giants out to look over the hills to see, it's not as far-fetched as you might think.
Right.
Because the book of Enoch tells us that some of the giants were about 450 feet tall. So at 450 feet tall, you can see a greater distance than anybody else.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that story's right, I don't know. But they are having interaction with giants. So to keep the bloodline, and you have to remember, the Nephilim, the giants, are not humans. They're not human beings. So this is what the Lord comes along later and he says, don't be unequally yoked. That is not forbidding you, that's not forbidding a Jew from marrying a Gentile. They were allowed to do that.
Right.
This is talking about believers and non-believers. And this is also, and actually it's not even talking about believers and non-believers as much as it's talking about make sure you're marrying a human being. And this is very important in today because today is going to be just as it was in the days of Noah. And in Noah's day, the only person that was not contaminated by genetic engineering was Noah himself.
Yeah.
So we're dealing with that same thing now. And so you have to remember, this is, Pastor Paul's always talking about the cycles and the examples. And it's right on because this just goes around and around until we get this down.
Yeah, that's right. And this isn't going to be the only time that somebody goes back there in searching for a bride. We're in a couple parashahs ahead. We're gonna run into it again.
So Rebecca's DNA was okay?
Yes.
She was from the tribe, yes. She was not contaminated by the Nephilim.
But her brother was?
Possibly.
Yeah.
So, that becomes the issue, is the bloodline.
The
Because
bloodline.
you give me these tangelos here, I got some shoes all on.
This all comes down to the DNA line because
Right.
the Lord is already engaged in the process of the salvation story here because man has already fallen. So now we have to keep this bloodline, and that's always been Satan's, that's his number one goal, is to contaminate the bloodline
Right.
of Messiah.
Yeah.
And still to this day, it's his number one goal in genetic engineering and all of that. That's why this is, genetic engineering is something that human beings really have no business being involved with, in my opinion.
Yeah.
It's one of the hidden arts that was revealed by the Watchers, I believe. And so we really should, and of course it's almost impossible in our society not to engage in genetic engineering in some form, shape, or fashion these days. It's everywhere.
Right.
So, but definitely we need to make sure when you get married and you hook yourself to become one with somebody, that person is actually a human being. And I know that sounds so bizarre, but the enemy is still trying to contaminate the line of Messiah. Because even though Messiah has come, Messiah is going to marry a pure, spotless bride. What does that mean? That doesn't mean you're sinless. If it means that, he doesn't get a bride.
Right.
Does everybody understand that?
Yes.
The pure spotlessness is the same thing we talked about a couple of weeks ago with Noah was righteous in his day, and that righteousness is referring strictly to a physical righteousness,
Yes.
not a spiritual righteousness. He was tamid. He was pure in his DNA. That's what that's talking about. And that's the lambs that were sacrificed had to be pure, spotless lambs. It doesn't mean they didn't have a bruise on their leg or something, although they didn't do that either.
Yeah,
But
and we're only
so
10.
that's very important to
yeah.
understand.
And
that.
remember, we're 10 generations out from Noah.
Yeah.
Sharon.
I know we went into great depth on this when we had the Genesis study, but is there a point, if in a family a Nephilim was involved in pure humanity, is there a point after how many generations, and is that the reason why the sins of some tribes are held to them for 7 generations or for less than
10.
that? Is there a point where that degradation of DNA is no longer effective?
The Bible tells us it goes to 10 generations, which is very interesting because we're at 10 generations right now in the story from Noah. So now we have a bit of a problem because Ruth was just shy of 10 generations.
Moabites, yes.
So what that would tell us is there is some sort of a half-lifing, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Grace.
Grace, half-lifing of the DNA. We don't understand all of these things. They present big problems for us. Because this is where somebody that doesn't have any understanding of the Bible, they come in and say, well, it says 10 generations. Ruth is not 10 generations. And therefore, how can she be in the bloodline of Messiah?
Right.
And so then they write a book about it saying, 3,000 contradictions in the Bible. But that really isn't the case. There's things in here we just don't understand how it operates. So we do see a decreasing. So today, I don't know where we would stand. I think we just have to take it from today, make sure your kids, to the best of your ability, are marrying somebody that is really, a human being.
Right.
If that makes sense.
How do you do that?
Leave California?
Well, I'm a native Californian, so I'm throwing out theoretical things here. So how do you do it? I don't know how you do it. Obviously, the best way is to be involved with believers.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Because the word is very clear. A Nephilim cannot be saved.
Right. That's where demons came from.
The word is clear on that. Nephilim cannot be saved. But we have a problem with that too, because Joshua is a Kenizzite, which is one of the giant tribes. So these all present problems for us.
Right.
Caleb.
Caleb.
I'm sorry. Yeah, Caleb was a Kenizzite, which is listed as one of the 15 giant tribes. So we don't understand. Look, guys, I say this all the time. There's more about the Bible that we don't understand than what we do understand.
Yeah.
If it's written, however, we've got to just go, okay, I don't know how God works it all out. However, this is what it says.
Right.
So hopefully that...
But the Indians knew, didn't they, Pastor? The Indians knew how to tell what's Nephilim.
Well, the Indians looked at external signs and traditionally that's where they would hold up their hand when they would greet somebody to show that they had only 5 fingers. Now, that's not to say that all giants have 6 fingers, although we know that from some of the remains that we found that
was
typically is the case.
6-finger people are Nephilim.
And not all 6. Yeah, there are people that have 6 fingers to this day, so they're not necessarily Nephilim, although they may come from Nephilim blood.
Yeah, like Princess Bride, he's only 5'8".
Yeah.
6-finger man.
Okay, yeah. So I mean, and now here's one of the reasons for that.
Princess Bride.
If we're dealing with non-humanoid individuals, that means they can change their appearance, obviously. So to be 450 feet tall, Abraham wasn't 450 feet tall, so the normal person was like 5.5 feet to 6 feet, right in there, still to this day. So to have these giants in the land, why were they giants? I personally believe they were giants because the Israelites saw the giant. You know, you can imagine if you're looking up at some guy that's 450 feet tall, you would appear like a grasshopper. David didn't look like a grasshopper compared to Goliath. It was 9'6". He looked small, but not like a grasshopper.
Right.
But at 450 feet high, that's grasshopper territory there. Okay, that giant could step on you, like it squash you like a bug. So so that height and that gigantic, enormous stature scared God's people away. But now today, it's more advantageous to blend.
Right.
And consequently, we get things like shapeshifters and all of that kind of stuff. But the enemy's main tactic right now, that's even in the emergence of the secret church. The secret church is all about blending.
Right.
And the New World Order is all about blending.
Right.
Equity, the new word, equity, is all about being equal, and nothing else matters. You see so the enemy is infiltrating and trying to do it covertly, because giants today would stand out. I mean, you go, well, you're a Nephilim. I can see it. The what?
When you had mentioned a few years back, my poor husband.
Oh, your poor husband has Nephilim blood. Yeah.
No.
Yeah, I don't know what to do
RH
with
negative?
that.
Yeah.
He has an R.
RH negative.
RH negative. The R stands for reptilian. Okay.
Or it might be positive, I'm not sure if it's negative or positive.
Turn to the right a little.
Turn to the right. Can you
So
see
watch
it?
his eyes. Make sure they don't go vertical.
Well, they went
But,
cross-eyed when I was a
Yeah.
kid.
You know, even in psychology, you have the fight or flight, and one of the factors is called the R factor. It's in every human being. The R factor is part of your DNA makeup. The R stands for reptilian. That's what it stands for. So when you see this, you go all the way back. It's going to be just like in the days of Noah. We're all contaminated. Now that's a hair-raising thought.
Well, yeah.
And of course, I'd be kicked out of most churches in America for even saying this.
Right, right.
You know, and I'm not preaching a doctrine or anything, but these are things that we've come to say, you know what, I think that this is a distinct possibility and things that we need to consider and really look at.
Yeah, I think it's more important to talk about this now, especially in the times that we're in, and when the word says, just as in the days of Noah.
Yeah.
So I don't know who was first.
They were eating and giving in marriage, see?
Oh,
I just had another question, that's all.
For me or?
For anybody that would like to answer it. Okay. I've read articles where, and I don't think it's just China, but they are doing experiments between different animals.
Yeah.
Trying to blend the DNA. Now, I don't know if there's an angelic being involved or not, and what this is going to birth. But I just want your thoughts. Do you think that there are some angels that might be involved in this kind of thing?
well, if there is, I believe that they're going to go to a pagan nation to bring all this out, and there isn't a bigger pagan nation right now than China, you know. So if something was accidentally released, which I don't believe it was an accident, but you know, go ahead, Pastor Bruce.
Many governments are working on super soldiers right now.
Yeah.
Super soldiers are non-human entities that look human. And the idea is, if you have non-humans, you can send them out to fight war, and there's not any kind of a moral conscience or problem with that.
Right.
So if you can create an army of superhumans, then you can go to battle as many times as fast as you can create new soldiers.
Right. Right.
So we're in up to our eyeballs in areas we should not be involved
right.
in. But it's not going to stop, obviously. So you and I have to just deal with this to the best of our ability. And it's okay, because we're created for such a time as this. So if they have the understanding of how to make these kinds of things, you and I need to seek God on how to deal with these kinds of things.
Hitler was doing that in the concentration camp.
Yeah.
Was trying.
Tila, go ahead, Tila. You've been waiting so patiently.
No. I'm curious about this, the Rh negative and Rh positive, because years ago, if you were married Rh negative, Rh positive, you had to have a transfusion or that child died. I know families that children died when there wasn't a transfusion. And now, when there's an Rh negative and Rh positive, they give they have pills or medicine that they do now so that the baby doesn't die. But so I was wondering with that Rh negative and Rh positive, because I know personally people that the child died.
Yeah, I can't address that. I'm not familiar with that.
Well, our granddaughter has the same type of blood, and she was told under watch when she was pregnant because they weren't sure if that baby could make it.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
See,
Well,
that kind
we-
of just strengthens the whole scenario, doesn't
Yeah.
it?
Well, I even have one daughter that's our Christine, yeah, and
Christine
then our granddaughter, yeah. So, go ahead, Ed.
So,
After
real quick
Ed,
comment
we're
on the-
moving on.
real quick comment on the super soldier thing. Oh, that's all, they're cloning so that these humans, they're not born. And so they don't have a memory or a past or any sort of relationships,
Right.
and that
Oh, yeah.
they're non-humans. But I
No
wanted
feelings.
to comment on
Bill, Sharon?
Sharon's question about angelic beings. They're demonic beings. In modern time, we've cloaked them as extraterrestrial.
Mm-hmm.
But Maria commented about Hitler. In his occultic background, he traded for technology in genetics. And that was the information he traded with quote unquote extraterrestrials, where they were actually demonic beings. And he traded for the technology in that, and he was working on superhumans way back then.
Right.
And he was trying to do genetic engineering. He would vet all these people and find, the people with the best traits, and he tried to breed these superhumans.
Well,
Actually their DNA was so advanced or so at such an elevated level that it kind of just kind of backfired on him,
Well, we talk about the brilliance of Einstein. He was such a brilliant man that some of the stuff that he came up with, he destroyed because he didn't want it to get into the wrong hands. Quite a bit of it, exactly. So,
well, and that's where when human beings are reared naturally, and God is able to direct. Einstein was really kind of like a birth defect in a positive way, right?
Right.
And it's like it's kind of like how sin has affected human nature. Now, we don't evolve, because if we evolved, like our human eyesight would become like eagle vision, but our mutations don't show up in elevated levels. They actually show up as blindness or as deficiencies,
Right.
So.
yeah. Okay, Bill, and then we're moving on.
Okay. I just need to make an attempt to bring us all back down to earth. Okay, because we're out there on the
Never land.
Okay. First of all, I don't believe anything I read, and the older I get, the more I'm convinced that that's a good way to start. Yeah, except for the Bible. And if a work doesn't have footnotes, like Eric Metaxas is Atheism Dead, fantastic book, but it's not a novel. It's not a science. There's 12 footnotes in the back of the book. I have another book on COVID-19. There's about 30 pages of footnotes in the back. Everything's, and so one thing I'm going to tell you for certain, I'd like to think the giants ended with Noah and the flood, but I'll tell you that you go online and you see all these giants. Here's one thing I want to leave you with.
You're going to show us his 6 fingers.
This is a human bone, okay? And they show these giants on the internet. I've seen hundreds of pictures of a perfectly scaled human bone. It doesn't work that way. Okay? As you get bigger, this is how the bone has to change to adapt to the weight. So I'm just going to tell you that everything I've seen on the internet so far is a fake. So just be careful how you're, that doesn't mean there's no giants, but I'm saying everything on the internet's a fake. You know, compare a chicken bone with a brontosaurus bone. This is what you see. Okay, so just be really critical about what we see, because this conversation is really interesting, but it probably brand us as a bunch of crackpots outside of here, you know. And so I think we just have to be really careful with our facts, and the rest of the stuff's interesting. But the other thing I'll say is geneticists can take the modern DNA, and both believing geneticists and non-believing atheist geneticists, so you can take that genome and you can trace it right back to one couple. So everything about race is BS, everything about all the family stuff, it's not really scientifically true. And you can get a marker, I don't mean that, with the Jewish people, but still the DNA can be traced back to a single couple, whether you're an atheist or a believer in God.
See, all this happened because Maria wanted to know why did Eleazar have to go all the way back to No, but that was good. This was a good discussion, and that's what a midrash is all about. Okay.
Ed has something to say.
Oh, well, let me go on. Let me go on. I'm gonna interrupt anyone right now because, boy, we've been on this for about 25 minutes. Okay, so so we're getting back to Eleazar. Okay, you know, he was succeeding, and there was times he was asking for the impossible. You notice that everything that he asked for, the Lord was given to him. Here it is. The Hebrew name Eleazar means God is my help. So now you understand why the understanding when Abraham went after to get his nephew Lot, Eleazar was with them. There's some understandings there that's all he took with him was Eleazar. Even though it says 318, you know, there's the rabbis who feel that, you know, it was because of Eleazar, God is with them. It's also interesting to note that Eleazar traveled 450 miles where he found Rebekah in the town of Nahor in Mesopotamia. Remember I was talking about some of the miracles that have happened? The sages say that this was one of the miracles God gave to Eleazar. He arrived at his destination in one day. Okay, that's what the Midrash says. That he arrived there in one day. Okay.
Light traffic. What's the footnote?
Yeah, there was no traffic. Okay, in verses 62 to 67, we read, now Isaac had come back from a journey to Beer-lahai, for he was living in the Negev. Isaac went out to meditate in the field towards evening, and he raised his eyes and looked, and behold, camels were coming. Rebekah raised her eyes, and when she saw Isaac, she dismounted from the camel. She said to the servant, who is that man walking in the field to meet us? And the servant said, "He is my master." Then she took her veil and covered herself. The servant told Isaac all the things that he had done. Then Isaac brought her into his mother Sarah's tent. And he took Rebekah, and she became his wife. He loved her, so Isaac was comforted after his mother's death. Okay, in in letter B, Isaac marries Rebekah. Okay? All right, so we read here too that Isaac was praying in the field. And while he was praying, he looked up, and there out in the distance, he could see the camels coming towards him. Some commentaries say that Isaac was just out walking and not praying at all. Others say that Isaac was using this moment at the end of each day to have some time to himself to process the significant events that he had recently experienced, and wondering what type of woman he was going to be receiving. At times, seclusion from others allow us to be in touch with our innermost feelings. We can reflect on things. We know that it was Abraham who sent his servant out to bring a wife back to Isaac. But we were never told that Isaac knew about this arrangement from his father, that his father had made. So go ahead now, Tila.
Where he went, which I thought was really beautiful, he always went to this Beer Lahai Royal, I can't pronounce it,
Yeah.
but that means well of the one who lives and sees me. And that was his meditation place that he would go to find God. And I thought that was really, because do we have that place within our own self that we seek him,
Right.
in the quietness of who our Father is?
Right. Okay, so off in the distance, Rebekah too could see a man walking towards them. So she asked who it was. It was her future husband. So she covered herself. Have you ever thought about that? He took her into her mother's tent, and he didn't even know what she looked like. But he knew that this is going to be my wife. So do you have, Maria has a problem with that. Okay.
I would like, I read this part and it didn't go down very well. She gets off the camel, he takes her by the hand, goes to the tent, and he took her, and she became, where's the ceremony? I mean, where is, hello, how are you? My name is Isaac, I'm 40 years old. Did they say hello?
Is that a 21st century understanding of how you do things? Remember, we're talking about back in ancient times.
It has to be ancient. Not even Adam did that with Eve.
Don't question.
Okay. Okay, the Torah tells us that Isaac indeed finds the comfort for which he is searching. Rebekah becomes a source of support and love for him. Isaac then brought her into the tent of his mother Sarah. One thing you have to know, that when Sarah died, the spirit left. Okay, the Midrash reports that as long as Sarah was alive, there used to be a spirit cloud over that tent. As Maria was saying earlier, they say the doors were open to offer hospitality. The dough displayed signs of having been blessed. The light burned from one Shabbat Eve to the next. All of these miracles, they went away, or all of these signs went away when Sarah died. Now, after he marries Rebekah, they all return. So he knew that, Eleazar brought the right woman. And if you'd see here, now after this, when we go into Genesis 25, we don't hear about Eleazar. He did his purpose, his job. It wasn't, that's why we read about a servant, not about a particular person with a name, because it was all about the mission that he was on. Go ahead, Bill.
I think I've made this point before that in our culture, I believe once a man and a woman sleep together, they're married.
Yeah, yes.
And I think that's got a biblical root right here. And I understand Maria's, horror with this thing, but Bill Handel, a talk radio guy, once said he was at a wedding where the two people were chosen by their parents, and somebody said, "How can anybody do that in this day and age?" He says that is one wedding that will not end in divorce, because you're thrust together. You have two choices.
Yeah.
You make it good, make each other happy, because divorce isn't an option.
Right.
So what do you want to do? Make a miserable situation and stay miserable your whole life, or you just
Right.
figure out how to work,
Yeah.
love one another, and in time you do. So
Yeah.
the biblical way, and
Well, you know what, and there's people that say, how can you arrange, let these people find each other and fall in love? How could you have an arranged marriage? But you know what? Arranged marriages in the Middle East work. They do,
You know why? Because the mother picks them. Come on.
Right.
Mama knows.
Mama knows.
You good enough. You.
Okay, in Genesis 25 now. Maria?
I'm just saying.
Don't say it like that.
Maria?
Even though it was arranged, and even
Uh-huh.
though the bride is picked and they're put together by the family, if you read, the woman still has a choice, because the brother said, "I'm going to call Rebecca and I'll ask her, do you want to go?"
Right.
And Rebecca came and they said, "This is the story, do you want to go?" And she said, "Yeah, I'll
Yes.
go."
Yeah.
So in a way, she still had a say in her marriage.
Well, yeah, she did agree to it. Okay, now we're going to talk about a marriage that wasn't arranged. Okay, and in Roman numeral 4, Abraham marries another wife named Katura. Okay, in Genesis 25, we're going to discuss Abraham's death and his descendants, and we're going to hit verses 1 through 18 of this parashah. The first verse in Genesis 25 will spark a discussion as to who really was Abraham's second wife. The first verse says, "Now Abraham took another wife whose name was Katura." Some Bible scholars believe that Katura was actually Hagar. And that's what you'll find out, that there are some that believe that it was actually Hagar. Sarah dies, and then he goes back to Hagar. That's questionable, but what is not questionable is the legitimacy of the relationship between Abraham and Katura. The word clearly states that Abraham took her as his wife. Okay, so one thing we'll find out too is in letter A, Abraham has 6 more sons with Katura. So who was Abraham's wife Katura? Let's look back a little. Okay, in Genesis 11:29 it says, Abram and Nahor took wives for themselves. The name of Abram's wife was Sarai, and the name of Nahor's wife was Milcah. Then in Genesis 25:1 it says, now Abraham took another wife whose name was Katura. The same verb took is used in both verses. That gives us a clear understanding that Abraham had taken on these 2 women as wives. And we all know about Sarah, but we do not know much about Katura. But in 1 Chronicles, you want to write this down, 1 Chronicles chapter 1, verse 32, Katura is referred as Abraham's concubine. A concubine held a position somewhat above that of a slave, yet she was not free, nor did she have the status or rights of a wife. Okay, the master of the concubine has sexual relations with her. If the concubine bore him children, then those children held an inferior status to those born of a wife. But they could be elevated to the position of a full heir at the will of the master. So to be a concubine meant that her master had a wife. Okay, so Katura had to have been around while Sarah was alive. Otherwise, she wouldn't be called a concubine, as it says in 1 Chronicles 132. Does it sound confusing? Yes, it is. You know, but these are the. I don't think it's a contradiction. It's a way. It's the way you want to interpret this. Some people are going to say. You'll probably find most Jews that would say Katura was actually Hagar. I don't believe so. So let me go on. So in Genesis 25:6, it says the sons of Abraham's concubines were sent away. This wouldn't be true if the children were from a full marriage, but it would be truly consistent with children of a concubine. These children would have been sent away in the same way Ishmael was sent away. Okay, Ishmael was a child from Hagar, and Hagar was a concubine. Okay, and then it says here, Abraham was to be old and beyond having children at age 100. And you can read that in Genesis 18:11. 100 years old, he was old, and he was having children. Paul referred to Abraham as being as good as dead as far as bearing children was concerned. Romans 4:19, the 6 sons born to Katura mentioned in Genesis 25 would have to have been born to a man that was at least 140 years old. If Abraham really did marry Katura after Sarah's death. Boy, that would have been a greater miracle than at 100. To have a child have children at 140, and that's what I say here, that these children listed in verse 2 would have been more of a miracle than Isaac.
Braver man than I.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. So in letter B, Abraham dies at age 175. And in letter C, the Midrash says, this is where we get it from, that Katura and Hagar are actually the same person. That's debatable, but that is why we always say two Jews, 3 opinions. Okay, go ahead, Sharon.
A couple of things. Abraham's father lived to 203, and I can't remember his age when he had his children.
Right.
So 175 and having children at 140 would not be a miracle, I don't think. But I think that God touched Abraham when he also touched Sarah as far as childbearing goes. He gave him more life and more strength than he had before. But the other thing that I question is he gave gifts to the 6 sons. He never gave a gift to Ishmael.
He gave him a blessing. Maybe the gift was just that water that he gave him, the pouch of water.
Oh, I hope not.
But if that's the case, Sharon, why would Paul refer to him as being good as dead, hardly not really anything there, unless the Lord came in and said?
Well, I think that may have been true, but like I said, his father lived to 203.
Right.
So him living to 175 is not any stretch of the imagination. But I think God touched them both when he wanted them to have.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Because at that age he couldn't even bear it.
Yeah.
Otherwise the Lord would have intervened to say you are.
Right.
So I don't know.
There's many points that we need to consider here, but in Genesis 25, 1-6, is that Abraham became the father of many nations. Holding to the promise God gave to Abraham in Genesis 17, that he would be the father of multiple nations. Okay, and by bearing even the 6 sons of Katura, because even here you're going to see the genealogy of all these sons, you know. So go ahead, Maria.
This is not in the Bible, but Mick Jagger just got married and had a baby, and he's 76 years old.
Well, I'm glad.
76. I mean, I know he had nothing really to do with it because, well, he did have a little thing to do with it. But the woman takes care of the baby. What does he do? He just appears and then disappears. I mean, that's the way it was in my day.
Okay, I believe Katura was this is my feeling. I believe that Katura was a concubine of Abraham. But I don't believe, as some Bible scholars believe, that Katura was actually Hagar. The reason I don't believe that it's like this is because in Genesis 25:2 mentions the name of 6 sons born to Katura, and none of them are Ishmael.
Right.
Ishmael is not mentioned. So, yeah. Also, when we look back at Genesis 25:6, it says, but to the sons of the concubine. That tells us that Abraham had more than one concubine. Okay, Tila, were you going to say something?
No, I was just wondering if Katura and Hagar were the same. How old was Katura? I mean,
yeah,
she had to be past childbearing age again, also, wouldn't she have been?
Yeah.
And so then,
you're right.
she has 6.
Yeah.
I mean, if 6 sons, I mean, she's really getting
up there.
Yeah, she's getting up there having kids.
You know, and letter D is something that Sharon said. Ketura's sons received gifts from Abraham. There isn't a blessing, so to speak, where that's passed down. It's only through Isaac, not through the concubine's sons. So, so getting back to the first verse of Genesis 25, when it says that Abraham took another wife after Sarah died, I believe Abraham married his concubine Katura, and he made her his wife. Okay, I mean, it's like I said, it gets real confusing here, but it does say he took a wife. Okay, we can only guess in Genesis 25:12-18. We can only guess if Abraham did not include Ishmael among those who received gifts while he was living. Whatever the truth really is, Ishmael returned to join Isaac to bury his father. You know, when Abraham died, it does say that both Ishmael and Isaac buried their father. So, you know, so at least a temporary truce was made to facilitate the burial of the father. They buried him in the cave of Machpelah in the field that Abraham had purchased for Sarah and for his descendants. You know, and although Abraham was dead, the purposes and promises of God remained in effect. In verse 11, Moses reminds us of this truth. And it came about after the death of Abraham that God blessed his son Isaac, and Isaac lived by Beer-lahai-roi. Okay, you know, in Roman numeral 6, the blessing was given by God to Abraham, or the blessing given by God to Abraham is passed on to Isaac. And then in letter A, both Isaac and Ishmael buried their father with Sarah in the cave of Machpelah. Although Isaac, the covenantal promises were to be carried on, and it was only through Isaac, none of the others. The work of God continues even when the saints, even when they pass away. Okay, you know, in other words, the torch has been passed from father to son from Abraham to Isaac. You know, and as for Ishmael, you know, it says, I have heard you, and behold, I will bless him, and I will make him fruitful, and will multiply him exceedingly. He shall become the father of 12 princes, and I will make him a great nation. And he does do that. He does that through Ishmael. You know, Abraham had always had a special place in his heart for his first son Ishmael. Only with the reluctance and under great pressure did Abraham send his son away. He didn't want to send his son away, but you know, he had to. In fact, the Lord told him, listen to your wife. Do as your wife says. Okay, go ahead, Maria.
They said Ishmael was sent away because Sarah caught him playing with Isaac with a bow and arrow, and he would point it at him and make believe that he would be killing him. And as the first son, I could see this is the way it was. The first son would take over, but it was Isaac that they would pick, so he would try to kill him, which is why they got rid of him. But the sages say that they were close. They would visit each other. But in reading this, I can imagine how Ishmael would feel burying Abraham with Sarah. And he would think, hey, what about my mother? Which would cause more of a hatred between the brothers.
Or maybe he thought sometime in the future that's where his mother would be buried.
Oh, I think he knew his mother wasn't included.
Right. Well, because Ishmael died at the age of 137, and he was buried. Notice that it was not said that he was placed in the cave of Machpelah. For this is a special place for the matriarchs and patriarchs, not for anyone that was born of any other means, and that's what was happening with Hagar, you know. And then what it says about Ishmael and his descendants, that they settled from Havilah to Shur, which is east of Egypt. And one goes, and it says that where he settled, it was in defiance of all his relatives, and that's in Genesis 25:18. Okay. In this verse, one more promise is shown to be fulfilled, the promise God made to Hagar many years ago, that he would be a wild donkey, and a wild donkey of a man he was. If he lived east of Egypt, who were the people that came out of the hills and attacked the stragglers during the Exodus? The Amalekites, you know, and these are descendants of Ishmael. So, and that is our Torah study for today. Everybody have a blessed day. And next week, come on out. Pastor Bruce will be bringing the Torah portion.